Hello, I'm Jesse White, Illinois Secretary of State.
This is Danielle Mitchell with Average Black Girl.
Hey, this is Don from Our Voice.
This is Jeff Badu from Badu Tax Services.
My name is Agwedim.
My name is Olivier Kamanzi.
This is Chateau.
My name is Eme Adibe.
And you're listening to Progressive Mind.
Progressive Mind.
Progressive Minds with your host, Alinko, on WGHC 98.3.
It's every Tuesday night from 7 to 9 p.m. on WGHC 98.3 FM.
This is the host of Progressive Mind. You can also call me Alinko. Join me every Tuesday between 7 to 9 p.m. Central Time as we come aware with topical issues that
I didn't have time for a health update. That's just a score.
Join the #1 community building show in the entire world as we seek to uplift our community. If you're outside the range, just download the TuneIn app on Google Play Store and search for WGHC. If you're an Apple user, just go to the App Store and download WGHC app. You can also ring 563-999-3221 to listen to us live. Search for Progressive Minds on Facebook, like the page, and turn on your notification. You can also catch us on YouTube by searching for Progressive Minds. Progressive Minds, to whom much is given, much is required.
Whenever you're ready.
And then you ready with Fambi, the Hallelujah song, after the break?
You're going in and then
and then after sports.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right here.
All right, let's do it.
Once we get going, I'll pull it up. So if people comment questions, you guys could read them right off. I think once we get going, I'll hand you guys.
All right. Wonderful people of Chicago, people of the world. It's 7 p.m. again here in the studios of WGHC 98.3 FM. It's your voice, your music, your station. I am your host, Alinko, and this is the Progressive Minds. Today in our seats, we have the Honorable Judge Robin Shoffner, who is running for office of Cook County Sub-Circuit Court, the 8th
Judicial Sub-Circuit.
Thank you so much for reminding me. It's a lot of technical words here tonight. You would have to bear with me, okay? I am talking to custodians of the English language, and so I'm going to try to cope up or keep up with them. Next to her is Katherine Vahey, Maloney Vahey, who's also running for the office of Cook County Judge.
Yes.
Brilliant. And then next to her is John Benson, John Christopher Benson, who's also running for the office of Cook County Judge. 8th Sub-Circuit. Thank you so much for helping with that. We would, as you're accustomed to, give you the sports update tonight. Because of time, we will not be able to go with the health and fitness update. The Honorable Judge Oran Whiting was not able to make it because of unforeseen contingencies that came up last minute. So please bear with us, even though he was on the bill, he couldn't make it tonight. Later in the show, Jamie Shapiro is supposed to be joining us on the phone. In the world of sports, the Champions League, to be specific, Roma 1, Shakhtar 0. Manchester United lost to Sevilla 2-1. And over the weekend, actually Monday, in the Premier League, Manchester City won their game 2-0 over Stoke City. Chelsea also won their game over Crystal Palace. That would be it for sports today. We will take one short break and then continue with our conversation tonight. It's the Meet Your Candidates section on the Progressive Mind Show. You don't want to miss it. Stay tuned. We shall be right back.
Circling round my head, but thanks to God now I made it out. I was just another sheep inside the belly of the beast. Now thanks to God now I made it out of Can't you see that no family upon it's a large dream. 40 days and 40 nights. Sick you shall find. I say, Mama, to yours. More country to your bubble. More blessings to the Taliban. May God give you all the fire. More country to yours. More country to your bubble. More blessings to the Taliban. May God give you all the fire. I was lost inside the desert, function set me around my head, but thanks to God now, I made it out of there. I was just another sheep inside the belly of the...
Welcome back here to the studios of WGHC 98.3 FM, your voice, your music, your station. Hey, we always want to remind you that you can visit our website, www.wghcfm.org, to make your contributions to us. This is what we rely on for our sustenance and for the good work the good work that we plan on doing in our community. We also use part of that to upgrade our equipment and to get those that we don't have that would help us in our operations here. So please help us by donating today. And we are obviously a 501c organization. Anything you give us is very much tax deductible. Tonight, as I said earlier, it is Meet Your Candidate section. Please get engaged. There's a reason why this is very important that more often than not, during elections time, we pay a lot of attention or particular attention to some peculiar offices and not necessarily the offices of the judge. But I think one thing that we have to bear in mind that these people play very significant roles in our lives. You know, one decision or one thing, a sentence from their mouth or from their office or from their bench can a long way impact on our lives. You know, in the society that we live in and anywhere else. Their seat is very, very crucial in our life. So please, let's pay attention to what they're going to be talking about today. If you have anything to say later on, I will be giving out the phone line so you can ring and ask questions or contribute to their discussions. I'll start with Katherine, who is in the middle. So we can go to maybe come back to Robin and then go to John, who's in the middle. John, you're going to be the last of everything because we have two powerful females today. So
I think that's fair. You're already making a judicial decision.
Thanks for that. So Katherine Maloney Mahey, Vahey.
Yes.
I understand from your background, you obviously have, married to a nice gentleman, have 2 kids. I also realized that you're very involved in the community. You've done a couple of things like serving food in, as a Bishop Gordet's residence for veterans. I would like to ask, what inspires you? And obviously, having had 18 years of public assistant in defense law practice, what is it that brings that community aspect of you that make you serve the way you do?
Well, I think it's from the family I grew up in, where it was always important to not just think about yourself and how to forward your own interests, but how to look towards others. I come from a family of teachers and people who've been in helping professions. And I started out as a caseworker and then moved into law. I think naturally from being a caseworker in courtrooms, I wasn't interested in the business or corporate end of it. I was interested in working with people. When I had my own family, it was important to pass that on to my children who are 10 and 12. And so I look for any chance where they can actively assist. And so that opportunity that you mentioned where through my local parish where we go to the veterans organization and feed the people who are staying in the Catholic Charities home there, makes them realize how much they have, and as a result, how much they owe to help others who aren't so lucky. So,
currently, what organization do you represent, and what office are you running for?
So I'm currently an assistant public defender, which is what I've done for my whole legal career. I'm assigned to the Bridgeview Courthouse, which is on the south suburbs of Cook County, and it has both Chicago courtrooms from the south side and suburban courtrooms. And I'm running for Cook County judge, and anyone who lives and is registered to vote in Cook County can vote for me.
Brilliant. Honorable Judge Robin Giffen. Robin, I told you today, right, that I was tempted to call it Robin Giffen. it happened. So, Honorable Judge Robin Shoffner. Good thing is you have an office next door to us.
Yes, I'm right in the heart of Uptown. When I started this campaign, I wanted a presence here, and I've seen you guys in the hallway, and we've chatted over time. But I've made a lot of friends in Uptown, and I'm delighted to be on your show today. So thank you for inviting me.
Brilliant. You hold a very high office. Regardless, you still have a very approachable demeanor. And what would you say makes you so down to earth that you're able to relate to anybody the way you do?
I am anybody, honestly. I think it's one of the most important attributes for a judge to have is humility. You want to treat people the way you want to be treated, and so that's the way I approach people when they come to my courtroom. I'm currently, I was appointed to fill a vacancy, and unlike Katherine, I'm not running countywide. I'm running in what's called the 8th Judicial Subcircuit, and that includes this area, the Uptown area, but it starts to the north at Devon, and it runs all the way down the lakefront to basically right around McCormick Place, and then it goes from the lake, Michigan, on the east, west to about Ashland. So that includes, all of Uptown, Edgewater, Lakeview, Gold Coast, South Loop, and it's like running a mini city election. But it's very diverse. There's no one particular class of people that you're appealing to. You're embracing a lot of different people. And I currently, as a judge, you had asked me about this a while ago, but as a judge, I sit in what's called the 4th Municipal District. And that is a courtroom. Katherine mentioned that she is in Bridgeview. The 4th District is in Maywood. Cook County has the largest unified court system in the country. And the way that works is that a judge can sit in any courthouse throughout the county, whether it's a district office, or it could be 26 in California, the criminal courts, or our biggest facility, which is the Daly Center. So it's a unified court, and you can just it doesn't matter where you live. Once you're a judge, you can serve in any courthouse.
What's the pros and cons of that system? I mean, is it the only, is that system run only in the state, or it's nationwide?
Well, I don't know how other states do it. I think it's a tremendous asset to be able to do it that way, because you're able to permit people to preside in courtrooms where they have expertise. If you look at 26 in California, where we have our criminal courts and where we have our most, horrific criminal cases, typically the judges who are sitting there are career criminal lawyers, either as prosecutors or as public defenders. And so, if regardless of where they live in the city, we can bring the best of what we have as a pool of judges and have them go to 26 in California. And the same thing applies for, domestic relations. There's your judges who want to focus on juvenile detention. And then you have branch courts that get to do a number of different things. So it's a tremendous opportunity for the courts to channel their expertise.
Excellent. John Christopher Benson, Mr. John Christopher Benson, is the most progressive candidate here, according to his biography. He has he has dedicated his life to seeking fair solutions for individuals, including those who face poverty, discrimination, and marginalization. He believes that The current challenges to the legal system include the war on drugs, mandatory minimum sentences, the mass incarceration of African American and Latino men, the treatment of the LGBT individuals by courts and jails, and the cyclical movement of individuals with mental health conditions through the courts, and the pervasive use of fines and forfeiture laws in high poverty areas. He's been a civil rights criminal defense for 7 years, Cabrini Green Legal Aid Director of Criminal Law for 7 years, Assistant Cook County Public Defender for 14 years, American Peace Corps volunteer Yemen for 2 years, lives in the 8th Sub-Circuit Court area for 31 years. You mentioned that you have been American Peace Corps for Yemen for 2 years. I wonder, and it tells me that you have some international experience, and I don't know, you and I were talking about Dr. Kwame Nkrumah's daughter,
right,
that you met in Italy.
I met her in Italy.
Do you think the experience that you had with her has inspired you somewhat to probably pay a visit to some country in Africa one day?
Well, I think Kwame Nkrumah has always been one of my heroes because he stood for the people. He and Patrice Lumumba, another African leader, were both people that I admired deeply. In fact, Kwame Nkrumah did say that if the Congo fails, Africa will fail. And of course, the Europeans, the Belgians, and the French, with some help from the United States, assassinated Patrice Lumumba. And after the assassination, the Congo kind of failed. The Congo, of course, is one big region in the heart of Africa. And as Nkrumah said, if the Congo fails, Africa will fail. And I think we've seen it.
All right. That was a little African politics there. Thank you for giving us that.
Sure.
I'm sure some of our listeners will be like, oh, okay. That's deep. But what would you say, and I'll go back to, I'll start with the Honorable Judge Shoffner. We know that there are problems in the judicial system. But one of them is that what would you say are the root causes of the high number of juvenile offenders, and what changes can the court system introduce to reduce these numbers?
So the Circuit Court of Cook County has undertaken measures over the past 5 years to reduce those numbers. And in fact, they've essentially eliminated the juvenile detention centers where they've actually held juveniles in prison or incarcerated, and have looked for alternatives to place them where they can be in a progressive, positive environment with limited but necessary supervision. So it's been a work in progress. There is a war on drugs that is created a lot of juvenile delinquents. Anyone who gets caught up in that is gonna have a problem. And until we as a society are prepared to address the war on crimes, there are going to continue to be large number of juveniles who are going to get caught up in it.
That's one root cause. Can you maybe give us another root cause, or is there two?
So by way of background, I was appointed to fill a vacancy on.
Yes. Pardon me for that. Yes.
I can just give a little bit.
Please do.
So I was appointed to fill a vacancy on the bench by the Illinois Supreme Court. And, I was a trial lawyer for 24 years. I did federal civil rights litigation. And so I know a lot about a lot of different problems. I also worked at a large company, but I was very involved in the community, helping kids primarily, because that's my passion, our kids. To address your question, what are the root problems? Along with this war on drugs that we have a deteriorating family base. We have fewer dads that are in the home. We have more broken families. And I say we have more broken families, but mind you, I'm an only parent. I adopted my daughter as a single person was born at Mount Sinai Hospital. I got her home 3 weeks after she was born. And so in a lot of ways, I'm not by society's measures, I'm not like a complete family. We don't have a mom and a dad. But I care deeply for kids, and I care about the families that they're raised in. As a litigation attorney who oftentimes represented police officers in the city in these federal civil rights cases, the way kids are being used by adults to help them facilitate these crimes and to protect them, back in the day, like 10 years ago, people used to take their kids as shields. And there was sort of like this honorary code that you wouldn't shoot a man if he had a child with them. So then what people started doing is carrying kids with them to protect them from getting shot. And now that code has been broken. And caught up in all of this violence are young victims, kids, but then they are then integrated and become part of a criminal enterprise that just unfortunately leads to a lot of untimely deaths.
So, yeah, please.
Can I respond to that? I'm going to dispute some of those issues. The problem with the juvenile court system, it's just broken. And the number one problem is poverty. These kids are poor. And it's really, it's based on racism in the United States. These kids are poor. They're caught up in a system that will very easily and readily transfer them to adult court. You should eliminate automatic transfers. Juveniles should stay in juvenile court. You can possibly have some kind of transfer hearing, which the system has always had. But in the 90s, they started transferring children to adult courts. And that is just a huge, huge, huge mistake because they're children. I don't believe people are using children for shields. That's nonsense. Let me finish. People are not using kids as shields. Kids are in a neighborhood where there is violence. These kids are suffering from trauma. They need to be treated as victims, and we need to deal with the trauma that the neighborhoods are living under. And with regards to police officers and civil rights cases, there are good police officers out there, but there is a huge code of silence. These good police officers in many ways are protecting bad police officers. I don't think it's a badge of honor to stand up and say that I defended police officers in civil rights cases. That does not make you a progressive. So I would say Judge Shoffner is not a progressive in that she is defending police officers on civil rights cases.
Okay, yes, I respond. But then maybe I should have set a couple of rules before we engage in the conversation. So what we want to do is address the issues specifically, so that because we don't have enough time to be rebutting or responding to issues that we raised on both ends. So I would plead with you all so we can stay on the issues, so we don't necessarily go into the other person's lanes by addressing or maybe attacking their point or the others. But please, if you may respond to that, and then we'll come to you, Katherine.
All right. So briefly, the question was, the question you asked me was about the high number of juvenile offenders.
And then the causes of, the root causes of this.
Blaming the court system for the number of offenders is like, is irrational. You can't blame the court system. By the time they get to the court system, they are already juvenile offenders. Okay. And so, with all due respect,
right,
the issue is not, it's a larger than a court system. It's a society that is generating juvenile offenders. And if we want to talk about those problems, I think we need to peel back the onion and look at the different causes.
Basically, what you're saying is that the reason why this case of these issues, or we have these crime issues, it's not that there's no correlation between that and the court system. The court system is not causing these kids to commit crimes and having this issue go on in our society. So, absolutely. Okay, thank you for making that point, and that makes sense.
And then, right, and then on the second point, I represented the city and police officers for more than 10 years as a federal civil rights litigation attorney, and the good thing about having someone with a conscience is that you don't try cases that you can't win because of culpability.
Okay.
And so I think it's important to have smart, talented people on both sides of an issue in order to resolve it in a manner that's most effective and most helpful to the people who are injured.
Okay, Katherine, please.
So I just want to go back to the issue of the juvenile system. The juvenile court system comes almost as a system of intervention because something is broken when the children come in. I saw in my brief time working in juvenile court that often juveniles were working for or working at the behest of adults,
Okay.
that there were criminal larger conspiracies. And the courts, for a long time, didn't treat the children as children. But it is clearer than ever, through science, through medicine, that children are children because they have not grown into their adult brains, that their executive function isn't working, that they aren't making decisions that adults would make facing the same options because that part of their brain isn't developed. And what you're seeing with that knowledge is a reaction across the country into making sure that juveniles are treated as juveniles and hopefully an evolution as to how we do that. I don't work with juveniles presently, but I worked with adults in problem-solving courts, which are courts that address problems like addiction, veterans issues, and mental health issues. And when you're able to address those issues, you find that people leave the system better off than when they came in, and they don't return as quickly. And we have a unique opportunity when working with juveniles to address that family unit and what's not working in that family unit. Because in a juvenile courtroom, which is otherwise closed to the public, is the juvenile accused of a crime and his or her family. And so the juvenile justice system has a very unique opportunity. And the idea of juvenile justice was born in Chicago. And so we should be leading on that issue. We should be realizing that it came from Chicago and we should advance it in a way that makes the country look to us. How do we deal with youngsters?
Good. So that
who are on the edge of taking a road one way or another.
Brilliant. So, okay. So just if I can just move from your point, what are some of the changes that the court system can start implementing to curb the situation? If you say we have to lead the way, so what can we do now?
There are children who have addiction issues and that need to be treated with that. There are children who have mental health issues and no one has treated them with that. There are children who have educational or learning disabilities and no one has addressed that. And that's a failure of the school system. And so for Chicago to want to be on the forefront of juvenile justice, they also have to shape up their juvenile support in other areas, because all of those things need to work together. Because so many of these children don't just lack the opportunities, but they lack the support so that they can go out and get those opportunities.
John wanted to say something, and Judge Honorable Robert, if you can, after him, I would like you, since you are on the bench, tell us what the court system can do on its own as a body to curb the situation, if you may.
But more directly, children are children, and the juvenile court system is going backwards.
Okay.
All right, because we have implemented automatic transfer laws. And what automatic transfer means, if a 13, 14, or 15-year-old or 16-year-old commits a certain crime, they are automatically sent to adult court. And they will get adult time. They will go through an adult trial, and they will get adult time.
By statute, correct?
It's by statute.
By statute.
Now, why are we doing that? It's not right. It's wrong.
By statute means that is the federal law.
By
State law.
statute means that the state legislature.
Okay, and that had nothing to do with.
Well, it mandates what you must do.
Okay.
I mean.
So you are just an implementer of what?
Well, I mean, you have discretion and you have guidelines, and there's certain things that you can work with. But understand that once the state legislature enacts certain requirements, as a society, we have to stand up against what we don't think is right and fight for what we think is right.
Okay, John, continue.
But you see that's not the question. The question is, what can the courts do? And the courts can speak out against these laws. These are ridiculous laws.
You'll come in.
They are immoral laws, and also they're not helping us. They're not helping society. Now, the juvenile court system, which was started in Chicago under greater reforms of the 1890s, 1900s, they always had a mechanism to transfer kids to adult court. But it was based on the child. It was based on the person. It was based on the juvenile himself. If there was nothing within the juvenile court system to rehabilitate the offender, they could transfer that person to adult court. So the truly dangerous, malignant, troubled kids beyond help could be transferred to adult court. Now what we're doing is we're transferring them not based on the person, we're transferring them based on the offense. And that's just wrong.
Okay. Judge, Honorable, do you want to respond to that?
Sorry,
Okay.
I just wanted to respond by saying, well, recently we have changed the age of adulthood from 17 to 18. So there are more people being treated as juveniles. And I have to say that in my experience of 19 years, there has been a shift. And I've had some clients who, during pendencies of cases, for the length of the cases, were transferred back to juvenile more recently than it was, say, 10 years ago and during the time when gang violence was even stronger in the streets. Unified gang violence, and by that I mean there's still a lot of gang violence in the streets, but at a time when gangs were more centralized and unified, I saw a lot more transfers of juveniles then. But there's no question that that if we're going to believe and say that juveniles are juveniles, we should treat them as juveniles, no matter what comes in with their charge, because they're juveniles.
Okay.
Now, the challenging thing as a judge is that you are required to be faithful to the law.
Okay.
And within that, you want to have compassion, and you want to use your discretion where you can.
Mm-hmm.
But you are not a legislature as a judge, and you cannot make the laws up as you go. If you don't like something, there's some things you can do within that, but you just can't go against the law.
I just wanted to clarify this for some of our listeners who might not understand some of the legal terms or some of the terms that we use in here. So if you say you are not the legislature, the legislature is basically the people that make the law, right?
There's the senators and the congressmen,
yes,
the state reps, the policymakers, the people who write the laws.
Exactly. So so now our listeners, some of our listeners can understand exactly what you mean.
Yes, it's important. Just by way of example, like they were going to pass a soda tax.
Yes.
All right. The people spoke out against that, and they repealed that.
Mm-hmm.
But if they had not repealed it and it was law, then that's what the people would have spoken, and the judge would be forced to apply it.
Okay, I think we can move on to what the current situation. Okay, can you please help us define what sexual harassment is? Okay, some of us, for those who come from the African, community or the African continent, we understand sexual harassment as the way we ought to, or we are taught back home. Here, it's a different system. The dynamics are different here. So some things that might not constitute as sexual harassment back home or in our community is here. So can you please help us? I'm going to throw it to the three of you. Explain to us exactly what it is and what the trend. Help us explain what sexual harassment is first, and then we'll go to the next question.
So it arises primarily. It can happen anywhere.
Yeah.
But where it really comes into play is the workplace. Okay. Because people want an opportunity to go to work, earn a living, and feed their families.
Okay.
When there is unwanted sexual advances and you feel intimidated or insulted by it, and it's connected in any way to your workplace, then it's harassment.
Okay.
And so you do not want to be people roping on you, saying things to you that suggest that you have to submit any kind of sexual favors in order to advance in your workplace, or even just to do your job.
Okay, so if a colleague goes to another work colleague and expresses his or her admiration for her dress or any part of her body, and is done consistently, can these things constitute as sexual harassment at the workplace?
I think increasingly you're seeing that, although the origins of the term really come from a person in power and an employee-employer relationship, or a hierarchical relationship.
Okay.
Similarly, in maybe schools where there are teachers and even adult students, when there's a person in power, That's where sexual harassment legally is born.
Okay.
Colleagues, but it's expanded. And I think what we're seeing is even coworkers or people of equal power are confused about those lines.
Exactly. That's why I wanted a deeper clarification of this. Yeah.
You can look at it this way. There's really two forms with that aspect of it, and then there's a separate form. You have to be concerned about a quid pro quo. In other words, a supervisor is essentially saying, sleep with me and you get a promotion.
Okay.
All right. That one's pretty clear. All right.
Yeah.
That's clear.
Yeah.
All right. And that's your quid pro quo. The next one has nothing to do with the quid pro quo, but what the issue then is unwanted and continuous. All right. So you have a nice dress. I like your shoes. Let's go out to dinner tonight. No, no, no. At some point, and that's where the line gets murky, at some point, continuous leads to sexual harassment.
Okay.
Now, if you are born, bred, raised in the United States, you probably have a clearer understanding of where those lines are. All right. If you are born, bred, raised in a foreign country, be it an African country, a Latin American country, or even a European country, those lines may be a little blurry. But what the key is unwanted, number one, and continual.
Okay.
That's really what it is.
And that becomes what we would call a hostile work environment, where it's persistent and the work environment is changed by the consistency, the constant behavior.
Well, there's another form of a hostile work environment which would have nothing to do with seeking an individual, and that would be something like maybe posters of nude women on the walls or something like that. That is a hostile work environment that has nothing to do with somebody making continued unwanted requests.
Okay. So if these are considered sexual harassment when they happen in a specific confinement, by your definition. So does it mean that if it's happening in a public place,
no,
or at a bar,
without a work relationship?
Yes, it does that.
No, the answer to your question is no. It has to be in work, school. It has to be in that kind of a setting.
Okay.
Now, if you're in a bar and you continue to harass somebody, that may be a different issue, like disorderly conduct, or you may get a drink thrown in your face.
Okay. All right. It's good you clarified this because there is some confusion and people do not necessarily understand it in this context. So thanks for clarifying it. And I wanted to ask John. Sure. Before I go to John for the next question, though, the phone lines have been open, so you can call in and ask any question if you want to or contribute. Please, when you do, remember that this is a very cordial platform. We like to share ideas and learn together, so you may please be respectful in your question and your comments. As long as you do that, you can always you can go ahead and share your opinion or ask your questions. The number is 773-942-7167. 773-942-7167. Mr. John, if you can tell us, why are you running for office?
I have a deep admiration for the court system. As flawed as I think it is, I admire a desire for human beings to resolve disputes in an orderly fashion, because courts are all about disputes, and in some ways it's very complex in that the rules of evidence, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But in the end, it's really quite a simple place. You really just need a stump and two places for advocates to stand and a place to stump for the judge to sit, and you can resolve these issues. If you don't have a court system, then you really are reduced to sticks and stones, bats, and guns. I mean, that's as simple as it is.
Honorable Judge Robin Shoffner, you are the sitting judge for the 8th South Circuit Court of Cook County.
Yes.
Why should people retain you?
I'm running on a philosophy of integrity and compassion. And that's the kind of judge I am, and that's the kind of judges we need in the Circuit Court of Cook County. I think it's important to be faithful to the law. That's our highest responsibility. But you have different people who come before you every day. And as you said at the beginning of the show, I have an approachable, down-to-earth approach to dealing with people. But you need someone who's going to honestly look at people and see hear their case and understand what their circumstances are so that you can rule in a way that helps them become better in the end. We talked about what can we do to make the courts better. You know, my whole thing is about restorative justice. I feel like, you know, if you did the crime, then fine, own up to it. But let's move forward with how we're going to remedy a situation by allowing you to, if you need mental health, to get mental health. If you need a job and to make restitution, you know, create opportunities for people to earn money by getting some sort of employment opportunities to people with convictions.
So is the court system doing this?
They're looking at options. They have some. They are channeling people, but definitely with respect to the mental health. You know, and with respect, especially when it comes to veterans, we have a special veterans court. We have a special court that deals with seniors and the elderly. And so it's important to take individuals as they are and help them become better people through the process. And that's why people should vote for me. But I have a passion for this too.
Yes.
That's born from my history.
Okay. Having said that, is there any case that have made you lose sleepless nights?
Yes.
Okay.
Even as a new judge, you know, every case is important.
Yeah.
Because, you know, when I first became a judge, I was told, you know, you really need to think hard about this job because essentially what judges do is they take stuff from people. I mean, they take your kids if you don't treat your kids right. They take your money if you don't pay your bills, and you know, they take your livelihood and they will put you in jail if you commit it. So, yes, there are cases.
Do you remember a case, a particular case?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
The case that I remember.
Can you briefly tell us the scenario, and then we'll go to Katherine?
Briefly, 2 high school kids. This is in the era of Trump. A high school kid tried to grab a girl's pussy, for lack of a better. Since we all know that.
Yes.
I'll just keep it simple.
All right.
As it turns out, he was a senior, and he had just turned 18, and she was 15, and he was charged with criminal sexual assault on a minor, which means he would have had to register as a child offender, and been, you know, his life. He was expelled from school, and they were seeking to have him registered as a child offender and just labeled for the rest of his life. And the case took a period of time because there was witnesses from all over. And, you know, essentially in that case, after doing a lot of research and hearing different arguments, I thought it would be terrible for that to happen to this kid who had learned his lesson. He had a perfect record, no priors or anything like that. But what it would boil down to is that he tried to kiss her and she said no, and then he got mad.
Right.
And so rather than labeling him as an offender for trying to like get more, it was more like, no, son, you need to take some anger management, and you need to learn how to channel your anger in a way that does not lead you to do stupid things, even if the president of the United States says it's okay.
Okay.
So those are the kind of issues that you have to really peel back, because the state's coming after these folks. That's their job, and you have to say, whoa, it's not that.
I still will come back to you so you can tell us a case that you judged or you presided over that you went home and just couldn't sleep. After the case, obviously, something that made you lose sleepless night. If you can tell us about that experience, if it happened anyway. If it happened at all. But we'll come back to it so that Katherine can.
So what comes to mind first are the cases. I'll tell you a specific one, but the cases generally where the sentencing is so serious. I have a case right now where if my client is convicted, he will be facing natural life, which means there is no term of years. He will spend the rest of his life in prison. Because if it's your third felony of a certain kind, that's a sentence you can. received. Those cases, as you get closer to trial, they just weigh on you and the
Yes, of course.
responsibility of them.
Please hold
But the
and
case
listen
that
to be
came
called
to
on.
mind was a case that was
Thank you.
a case with a much better ending, which was a young man, and this was a number of years ago. He was 17, he was a high school student, and he was stopped by the police, and he had a gun in his backpack. And as soon as I met him, I knew that he was different. He was a very soft-spoken young man. And I spoke to his family, and I spoke to him, and he told me that he'd been being bullied. And someone he knew gave him the gun to chase off the kids who were bullying him. And now he was looking at going to prison. So this was not a kid who'd ever been arrested. He had a family who was there. In fact, a very large family that filled the courtroom. And so as I was trying to help him, that he was in jail at that time. Such a young, kind of non-corrupted person. He was very... I want to use the word sweet, and I want to use it in the best sense, bothered me terribly. And that was before all of this change, where someone like him would not have been in jail. And it took me about 45 days. I gathered letters from the family, and he was an exceptional young man. And from the church he went to, and from the school, and presented to the state's attorney, who then actually dismissed the charges because they sat with him and they realized the same thing I knew. And when you are a lawyer in a courtroom and you've developed trust with people and you go to someone, you say, this is a different case. This kid is not like the regular kids that we're struggling with. Come sit with this kid. That was one of the best dispositions I had. And it wasn't my fancy footwork in a courtroom. It was really understanding what was needed, and then an exceptional state's attorney who listened and did the right thing. But I lost a lot of sleep over that young man.
Excellent.
Yeah.
We have a caller on the line. Please tell us your name and why you're calling. Okay. We will let the sitting judge respond to that, and the two of you, if you wanted to chime in on that as well. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So
Thank you so much, Bridget.
So it sounds like his case is currently pending, is that correct?
Oh, she may have left.
She disconnected.
Yeah, she may have left. Yeah.
Okay.
That's what it sounded like.
Yeah, but it sounds like the case is currently pending. I'm reluctant to give my advice on a currently pending case.
Absolutely.
And so I would defer to the
Fair enough.
to the lawyers who are not judges.
Yes, please.
And in fact, I can't give, as lawyers, I can provide general information. I wasn't sure, and maybe I misheard this, of whether this young person was considered an adult under the law or a juvenile. Did he mention the age? Did she mention the age?
No, she did not mention.
So,
if you're listening, caller, you can call back and maybe help the panel here answer the question.
I will say that I've heard recently that Chicago public schools are taking a much harder line on what used to be years ago fighting. They kind of are coming in criminally, and there is no process within a lot of schools to handle high school problems that in fact they go right to the police, which is consistent with what we were talking about earlier about not handling juveniles as juveniles. High school kids are high school kids, and they need the opportunity to work through any problems they have, and a fight can be an opportunity for them.
Okay. So I'm sorry, please.
That's okay. A fight between high school students is not unheard of. I mean, that's what happens in high schools. That should be worked through. I don't know what in that school the process is, but there should be a process, because there's no learning how to deal with problems without a process unless it's taught to people. So
yeah, hopefully she can call back so we can get more clarification. She's on. Okay. Yes. So, yeah, I think so. Mrs. Katherine, Vahey wanted to find out from you if this was ask the question. I'm sorry.
How old was this student? Okay. So, right. So 17 is still a juvenile in Illinois and 18 is an adult. If someone is charged with a crime, they have a right to an attorney. A public defender will be appointed to them. So are you asking about how they can get help within the court system? Okay. So the first thing anyone should know is that if they're charged with a misdemeanor or a felony, they have a right to a public defender. And although there's a perception sometimes that public defenders are lawyers that are not working for people, in fact, we're paid by the county and we're paid to represent people, and it's a job that we want, and we're in courtrooms every day, and we know the judges we practiced before. So my first piece of advice would be to make sure you go and sit and talk to your lawyer and make sure that your lawyer is listening to what you have to say and answering your questions. That sounds like the first stage.
I hope your question was answered in the right fashion, Bridget. Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes. It sounds like that would be a good idea.
Okay, so whilst you are on, you mentioned something about getting maybe a public lawyer who is paid by the county.
Yes.
Is that sometimes the skepticism with people is that, okay, let me go, is that should I take a private lawyer who doesn't work for the system?
Yes.
Or someone who's being paid by the system? They sometimes feel like there might be some biasness, because
yes.
their representatives are working for the county,
right,
and so might not be necessarily be for them as a defendant,
right.
Or what would you say? What I'll say to that?
So my experience is that there are.
You haven't spoken for a while, so if you want to.
Thank you. I think both of you here, John and Katherine, are public defenders.
I am presently a public defender.
I was quite a while ago.
And so I will just go on record and say, as a judge, I think some of the public defenders that are in court are some of the finest lawyers that are coming to court. They have areas of expertise that no one else has because they see these cases day in and day out, and they will fight for the cases that deserve to be fought for. And that's been my experience. I will also say they have a lot of cases, and so where you have a case that's in the gray area. If you don't have the evidence, if you don't have the support for your defense, it's going to be difficult for a public defender to really want to fight for you. Sometimes if you go to see a private lawyer, they will dig and dig and dig and dig. Of course, you have to pay and pay and pay.
Okay, right.
So I don't think that the public defenders are
it will be any fairer, compared to a public, a public defender.
Right, because you just heard Katherine talk about how she was able to help her client in a similar situation by having to take, but he had the support of his community, of the witnesses to help bring the facts to light about his circumstances. And so if there's a case that's worth fighting for, I think our Cook County public defenders will fight for it.
Can I just say, if you're looking to speak to any lawyer or your public defender, you should come in and evaluate who you're speaking to. And by that, I mean, you should see if they answer your questions. You should see if they do what they say they're going to do, whether it's a private attorney or a public defender. And you should see if they're meeting those standards, just as if you were going to any other professional. Are they listening? Are they answering the questions I'm asking? Are they addressing the issues? Are they explaining to me what I don't understand? And I think, in my experience, is that you can find excellent professionals and professionals who are not at their best in any profession. But I'm very proud to be a public defender. I've worked with excellent people, and we do have very good resources in terms of paid investigators on staff, experts in all fields, so mental health that we can hire to bring in and speak to people. So I think that if the person has that perception, they can just hold it until they see what their experience is.
Mr. Benson, you haven't spoken in a while. In the next 3 minutes, and then we'll go on a short musical break.
Is there a question?
If you wanted to respond to the last caller.
I don't know enough facts.
Okay.
These cases are so fact specific.
Okay.
So.
All right. Brilliant. We will then go for a short musical break. We will come back and continue with the candidates here. We have been talking to the Honorable Judge Robin Shoffner, and then next to her is Mrs. Katherine Maloney Vahey, and then next to her is Mr. John Benson. Stay tuned to the Progressive Mind Show with your host, Alinko. We shall be right back.
She asked a question.
It's like my job is done.
She wanted to hear on the radio.
Yeah.
Do you know we have a fourth person calling it? Who? Did we have a fourth person that was going to call it?
Yeah, he's going to call it like 8:45 or about. Shapiro. Okay.
Where'd the music go?
He didn't give me the clean version, so I had to skip the song.
I heard that, not clean version.
Is your battery good?
Behind that's where I go feel make your man go blind. And if it's too when I shake, oh show you any cause I ain't got a bounce, it's already shaking. Yeah, me a body if your man can't go some boys to the to say a man can't go. Now why they share me police station, it's a 20 more drinks to big nation. Ah boy, what you ask me start to body now papa share for every try your bay, sorry, not the custody, not the rap baby, I'm what me
I said, was this Bridget again? Oh, okay. We're on a musical break right now. And I'll put you on hold, and when we come back, you'll hear Alinko call you on, okay? Thank you. You gotta call her when we're back. You gotta call her when we come back. I couldn't hear her name.
All right, I'll go. Ready? Welcome back to the Progressive Mind Show, and we are talking to these honorable people here, these wonderful ladies and gentlemen, specifically Honorable Judge Robin Shoffner, who was on the far left, and in the middle is Katherine, and then Mr. Benson. Due to some constraints, some other businesses that the Honorable Judge has to attend to, in a few minutes she'll be taken off the seats. But she wouldn't be, before she does that, a few things that she wants to respond to. But I just got reminded by my producer that we have a caller on the line. Please tell us your name and where you're calling from. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mhm. And you also have to vote for them, right? They're running for office on the 20th of March. Is the day. So you would stay tuned. They'll be giving a little more details about how you can vote and who to vote for. Okay, so just stay tuned. Before the show ends, we'll be giving you that information. All right. Okay. All right. You're welcome. Do you have another call? Okay. All right. So like as I was stating, the honorable judge has to take seat. So before that, a few questions before so we can wrap up with her, and then we'll continue with the two of you. You have been in the judicial system for some time now.
Yes.
And yes, and I wonder what drives you. What gives you the passion for the judicial system? If you have to come back to this life again, would you choose the same path?
To answer your question, yes.
Okay.
But my passion for the judicial system stems from the fact that, when I was 6 years old, my family lived in North Carolina in an African American community, and my dad was in the military, and we were assigned to Omaha, Nebraska, and that was back in 1966, 67. And there were no other African Americans there. We were among the first that moved to Omaha, Nebraska. And the Civil Rights Act had just been passed, Civil Rights Act. And so when we got to Omaha, we couldn't find housing. No one would let us buy a house or rent a house from them. Our teachers had to escort us home from school because we were beaten up after school and harassed. And I saw how the Civil Rights Act allowed us to create a life for ourselves, to get housing, to get education, to get an opportunity for a great future. And I've been inspired by what laws, particularly civil rights laws, can do to make our society great. And I've just always been very passionate. I knew early on that I wanted to be a judge. And so after I finished law school, I worked for the appellate court because I wanted to see firsthand how judges ruled. And I still have that passion to serve as a judge.
Okay, so now it gives me the opportunity to ask you this question. What is the significance of Black history in this world that we live in now? I wouldn't say the United States only, because I know it's celebrated in the UK and in Australia and in Canada. Why is it so significant?
Because we're faced with new challenges every day. And if we don't look at our past, we can't overcome the challenges that we have in front of us. When you see people accomplish things, you acknowledge it and you honor it. And that's why even when Barack Obama became president, it's like Blacks felt like they could do anything. And it's kind of interesting because in this race, in this 8th Judicial Sub-Circuit, I'm African American. And I'm seeking to become the first African American elected in the sub-circuit because it's so diverse now that it's possible. But there's never been an African American elected out of the 8th sub-circuit before.
Okay.
And so, but I feel very optimistic, and I think that it's important to see where we come from so we know where we're going.
Would any of you want to chime in on the issue of the issue and the relevance of Black History Month in the world that we live in today?
If I could, I think it's always been said that Black History Month is important for Black children especially, because it's known that you have to see yourself in others to be able to imagine yourself in that spot. So children need to see role models that look like them. But I also see in my own children that Black History Month gives them a view of things that they otherwise wouldn't see. And as we hear more and more about not just the greats, the iconic people in Black history, such as Martin Luther King Jr., but people we hadn't known of before. I saw the impact. So my son was so impressed with the movie Hidden Figures and the story of Katherine Johnson, who was an African-American woman who was ahead of her time and a brilliant mind in mathematics. And in that movie, if you recall, because he's a child, the thing that impressed upon him most was that she wasn't allowed to go to the bathroom. that she had to walk across a campus. And so when it was time for him to pick someone to write about for women's history, he picked her. And I don't know if he realized how that because of that movie and seeing someone he otherwise wouldn't have seen, that would not be a surprise to him to learn of African American women being able to handle that kind of work. And so that's what that does. That seeing that history gives people a chance to see themselves, and it gives people a chance to see African Americans in a way that otherwise aren't represented.
Have you seen Black Panther?
I haven't, but my husband, well, it's election season. My husband took them on the first weekend. They went without me.
No,
Okay.
Yes. Have you seen it?
No.
Okay,
Yes.
but you want to chime in on
Sure.
that, and then also if you can just add to that, what gives you better qualities that that qualifies you to run for the office you run for?
You know, it's hard to separate Black history from American history, and I think it's nice that we have these months, Women's Month, Black History Month, but really Black history is American history, and to even attempt to separate it is a big mistake. Black Americans have contributed so much to this society in ways that we don't even know. In fact, it so enriches the United States. You know, I think one of the greatest works of literature is W.E.B. Du Bois' The Soul of Black Folk. I mean, my goodness gracious, that book is so fantastic when you walk with him as he's going through the Deep South, talking about education and teaching, and he's doing it over 100 years ago. Those struggles haven't changed. So that's a classic book that really does need to be taught. And so I find it troubling that we do separate Black history from American history, because it really is history.
Brilliant. The next point, the qualities that you want listeners to know about you that best qualifies you for the job.
I think it probably is my depth of experience and breadth of experience. Travel has helped me a lot. I did live in Yemen for 4 years. I learned to speak Arabic. I'm very disturbed by this anti-Muslim rant that we have going on now. There are so many more similarities between Islam and Christianity and Judaism than there are differences. We used to get along, and now suddenly we don't. This is a terrible, terrible time we're living in. It breaks my heart to have all this anti-Islamic rant. My travels in Africa have made me understand people who have different perspectives of the world. I was so well treated in Africa.
Which country?
Oh, I went to Ethiopia, Kenya, Tanzania, Central African, Zaire.
Zaire.
Zaire
Okay. Now Congo.
Congo now.
Yeah.
Central African Republic, Chad, Niger, and Algeria. Basically east.
Why are you cycling around instead of going to the right place, which is Ghana?
No, I didn't make Ghana. I didn't make the Gold Coast. I know, and I have such a hankering for seafood.
Okay, you would just love it. I know the honorable judge has to take leave of us, but before you go, please tell us one thing. How can people? Why should people vote for you, and where and how and all that?
So I'm running in the 8th Judicial Sub-Circuit. There are 5 candidates in my race. 3 of us have been found qualified. I am one of the candidates who has been found qualified by every bar association. That's important because people will try to distort and misrepresent the record. I've just been evaluated. They found me qualified or recommended. And since I hold the seat, I've got everyone wants to take that from me. So I think the record is being misrepresented in that respect. And I want to set the record straight about that. My compassion, I've come from humble means. And so when I deal with people, I know what it's like to take their money from them when they don't have very much money. I know what it's like to take their kids because I have kids, and that's the last thing you want to have happen. but it's important just to be able to feel people and to appreciate people and to rule in a way that is compassionate and fair.
I wanted to ask you this, since you were the sitting judge. A lot of times people go to the courtroom and put up certain petulances that are not necessary because of whatever. What would you advise listeners or anybody not to do when you're in a courtroom?
Oh my God, there's a list like 10 long.
Okay.
Take the gum out of your mouth so we can hear you.
Okay.
And it also shows that you care about how you project it. Pull up your pants, when you come to court, bring your best, bring your A game. Because oftentimes I deal with pro se litigants. I encourage them to get lawyers because if they get too comfortable, they say too much, and then they can find themselves in trouble. So I would say make sure you talk to a lawyer or a public defender before you go to court so that you don't get yourself in more trouble. And then, and so once you kind of get someone on your side to help you through it, because it can be a very difficult and complicated process, regardless of what kind of case it is to just be genuine and be true. Okay. And that's the best advice I can give.
All right. The phone lines are still open. It's 773-942-7167. 773-942-7167. Any moment from now, Honorable Judge Robin Shoffner will be leaving us. But now that she's here, if you want to ask a question, please do before she leaves, because I wouldn't forward your question after here. So if you can catch her now, do. If not, she'll be taking leave of us.
Again, thank you so much for having me on the show. Thank you, John. Thank you, Katherine. It was a pleasure. It was. And I wish everybody the best.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
All righty.
Well, the conversation still continues. If our producers, we would take a short break, and then we'll come back, and we would definitely be talking more to this wonderful people here in person of Katherine Vahey and then Mr. John C. Benson. Stay tuned. We shall be right back.
Black Panther? Did you go see it?
Yeah. Yeah, good movie. Good movie. I mean, it's something. Once you see it, you want to see it again.
Well, I'm hoping they'll see it again because they'll take me to see
it.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I mean, they put something. It's such an intriguing movie. It will want you to see it. You would like to see it again to kind of get a more understanding.
Yes.
It's very complicated. Yeah. It's very complicated.
There's a lot of different levels.
Yeah.
Be it in Africa itself, be it America, Black Americans, like it brings everything together. And I think they try to just make the message like, remember we're all rooted in the same place. So, stop fighting each other and let's work together. No, there's a lot of different levels to it. I don't know, Michael B. Jordan's character was basically the American representative, and he was supposed to be like the villain in the movie.
Yeah.
So a lot of conflict, just within the characters themselves. My friend said she didn't know how to feel about it. But I mean, it's definitely interesting. Yeah, I saw it once. I want to go see it again.
Great. Yeah.
Are you just doing one song tonight?
Yeah, that's one. Then we'll go to them. I think
we gotta take this OSB Dub song off the list.
Yeah.
She's dropping.
Do you have the clean version?
I can look.
Yeah, because
I'll look during whenever.
I like the beat, but I just keep forgetting.
Yeah.
It's about 30 seconds.
The architecture special, the food is everywhere.
Let's go. Welcome to WGHC 98.3 FM, your voice, your music, your station. We keep encouraging our community to make your donations to us, which helps us in sustaining what we're doing here and improving our equipment. The website is wghcfm.org. It's upgraded now, so you can actually choose any program or any show that you want to donate to instead of giving it to the entire organization. So there are options for you, and we definitely want you to help us in this manner. And we will still want you to call in and have an interaction with our candidates. There are a few comments. I missed a couple of them on my Facebook feed, but there are a few ones here. I would like to read them out to you. There are questions for you guys. This is from Bennett Biney. Excuse me. He says, very impressed with all three candidates. Since there's a huge African American community in Chicago, especially the North Side, he would like to find out from you if there are any concrete plans to help this growing community.
So, in our role as judge, we both can't have a platform as to what our general beliefs are, and we're limited to that role. I think when you're looking at why you want to choose the judge, I think you have to look to their experience and the breadth of their experience, because people can promise things when they're running for office, but if you look at what they've done, that's what they've believed in through their actions. So I was a caseworker. I worked with foster care. I loved being in courtrooms, and that's where things happened. When judges said this needs to change, it changed. And so I went to law school here came to law school here in Chicago and studied graduate level social work. Worked at Cook County Hospital, now Stroger Hospital. Worked with disability rights and in the public defender's office. And I've had many roles in the public defender's office, but the whole of my career has been working with people who are disadvantaged because they're poor and they don't have legal representation. And also with people who were mistrusting of a system that they were walking into. And so the way I see my role is as a bridge between someone who mistrusts the system, and I'm someone who has to help them understand it and represent them well to the best of their wishes. So I can't make any promises, but I can tell you that's been my experience, and I've worked with people throughout my whole career who were disadvantaged, many minorities in the city. And so my view is that. My view is understanding of people who don't otherwise have a voice.
In essence, your experience showed that you have a sense of community. You've always been involved. And so by you getting office, by you being a sitting judge, some of your philosophies or some of your policies or some of your work would be somewhat geared towards the benefit of our communities in general.
That's been my whole adult career.
Adult career.
Yes.
I know that.
Yeah.
Based off what I found out by researching about you. Johnny, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I share that sentiment. If you look at my career, it's all been service, from the Peace Corps in Yemen to my work in Africa, to the Public Defender's Office, to Cabrini Green Legal Aid, and now I'm taking civil rights cases to level the playing field. I'm taking cases where I think people have been mistreated by the system, and I'm attempting to get compensation for those people.
Excellent point. We have a few people who are still joining us on Facebook. Tete is here. Pepra Mensa is watching. Jocelyn is also watching us. Erica Pokua is also here. Rebecca is online. Braids Fatima said, Fatima, sorry, I don't know why. I shouldn't have said Braids. It says, good evening from the south side. Good evening, ma'am. Still Royal Black Jesus. What's up, bro? Lashandra Smith, Rayfield is also here. And then we have Selassie, Elliot, and Regina Obeng. They are all watching us. Do you have any judicial role models?
I've been in courtrooms for 19 years, and I've had some judges that I really loved working for. There's a judge who's now no longer working, who worked at 26th Street, Judge Schreier, and he had been a state's attorney, but when I was assigned to his courtroom, I found him to be cautious until he trusted you. And then he was very generous. In my experience with him, I also saw the way he treated people pro se, people who were representing themselves. And he was very respectful to those people. Similarly, a judge who just retired from Bridgeview, Judge Davey, was probably the most compassionate judge I saw. That when people would come in with difficulties, he would apologize for their losses. He would give people the chance to pay any fines that were due for as long as it took them. He treated people with a kind of respect that I don't always see in courtrooms. And so those are the two that come to mind. And in both of those instances, it has to do with how they treated the people before them.
Thank you, John.
I would say Thurgood Marshall. If you look at what Thurgood Marshall did, of course, he's most famous for the Board of Education cases. And he defeated the argument separate but equal. The way he did that had a lot of legwork involved, because he took a team of investigators throughout the South and they analyzed all of these Southern schools to show that they were separate, but they weren't equal. Right? The black schools didn't have books. The black schools didn't have windows. The black schools didn't have desks. Therefore, he blew the concept of separate but equal out of the water. And it wasn't with like pure legal brilliant mind, although he was a brilliant legal mind. It was facts on the ground. He went out and he developed the facts to blow the argument away. And I think that's really what lawyers have to do. Lawyers really do have to roll up our sleeves, get down and get the facts together. And judges have to do the same thing. It's a little bit different because the judges get the facts sort of delivered to them. But they still have to roll up their sleeves and figure out the right facts. But Thurgood Marshall, if you look also at his history prior to the Board of Ed cases, he represented the black sailors who were accused of essentially sabotage. And that was pure racism in the Navy. So I would hold him up as a role model.
Brilliant. There are a few questions that I missed, but I think I've seen it on the other computers phone, so I'm going to try to read them. Before that, Mahey Ellen just joined us. Bob Struck says, Katie is the real deal, my old law clerk.
That's right.
Thank you for joining us, Bob Struck.
All right.
And
Was that Bob Struck?
Yes,
yeah,
it's Bob Struck.
and Pablo Coco is also here. Jacqueline Techi Yabua is watching. And wanted to go through a few questions. Lashandra Smith Rayfield says, how do you plan to address the growing number of juvenile offenders that suffer from mental health issues, especially when their mental health issues are documented throughout their schooling via IEPS, OHIS, and 504 plans? Do you any of you wanted to take up that question?
Yeah, that's exactly my point that I tried to make earlier. I think juveniles are being very mistreated within the system. I think we need to treat them as children. And also, if you go to my website, you will see that I find it a huge problem that mental health issues are not addressed. We have a revolving door. So much of the court system, especially in the juvenile system, especially in the child protection division, that has so much to do with mental health. So bottom line is we have to go back.
Okay.
And we did this at one time. We have to go back to treating children like children. They're not little adults. Their brains function differently.
Okay. Next question is actually a statement from Charity Ikpe. She says, a teacher, I totally agree. Getting a student screen helps on how to correct a child. Now, I am not sure if she was responding to you guys earlier. Okay, I think that's what it is. I'm not able to get to the next one yet. But let me ask you, if I may ask, if a parent now is listening or a guardian is listening and they have a very troubled teenager, which a lot of parents are going through, what, apart from the norm, okay, maybe try and talk to them or to maybe get a counselor, what are some of the other measures that they can take to kind of get their children in line?
Well, Am I
Yeah.
interrupting?
Yes, please. No,
The person
Katherine.
who just messaged us asked about children with 504 plans and IEPs, and those are plans that the public schools are obligated to give for children who have disabilities or have a medical disability that needs special circumstances in learning. So clearly that's somebody who's doing what they should be doing.
Right.
They've gotten the child looked at by somebody, they've brought that information to the school, they've asked for a specific plan. There is, when I was a law student, I worked for an organization, a wonderful organization that worked in Illinois with the Americans with Disabilities Act, called Equipped for Equality. And they have wonderful information at their website, and they also provide support for parents who are going into these IEP meetings and 504 meetings so that they know what their rights are. Because if they go into those meetings, the schools, you can be sure, are informed with their lawyers of what their rights, the school's rights are. But parents need to know what their rights are for children. So in terms of getting assistance for children in school, people who are making those plans are doing everything they know how to in school. This is something where society at large needs to address it through schools, insurance, medical attention, and it's a tough road because it's not easy. And depending on what school district, who the personnel are, you can find a lot more help or a lot less help.
While the kids are getting help, are there options for the parents or the guardians as well?
Not in those
because it can be very stressful.
Right. Well, and there's no family where there's a mental health issue with a child that's not impacting. I mean, that's the whole foundation of social work. When you're looking at the whole, you can't just treat one part. The whole is affected by the part. So a child who's going through a trauma or needing special services, that impacts the family, and the family will need assistance too. But in the 504s and the IEPs are not built for that. And often in the way that we do things, we don't have the support naturally in our culture, unless you have a very tight family to kind of help along with that.
So is that one of the things you think the court system can start maybe initiating to help parents? In addition to getting help for their troubled children, parents can also get help to alleviate some of the stress and the impact these troubled children bring on the family.
I've seen a lot of parents come with their children into the mental health treatment court and veterans treatment court.
And sometimes it would not be only mental health; it can be other.
Yes, yeah. Yes, but what I saw very often when I was dealing with drug court were parents who were saying, "I have been trying to get help for my child for years."
Okay.
And when you're dealing with an addiction like heroin or something that just devastates an individual and a family, they're finally at that moment able to get it. But very often, it's difficult. Once they get into the court system, there are interventions available. And I don't know if I've mentioned this, but it is cheaper to treat somebody than to incarcerate them. It's just economically, it makes sense.
Okay.
So that's one of the reasons why it's catching favor here, because it's not just a progressive belief, it's also an economic reality.
I posed a question to the Honorable Judge Robin earlier, which is her passion for the judicial system. And I know you obviously have it. What is it about it that you so much love? And given a chance to come back to this life, would you choose the same path?
I would. I've taken steps that have led me here. I mean, I didn't start off always knowing.
So what makes you love the judicial system?
I loved courtrooms.
Right.
I really loved courtrooms. There was something about the way that so many pieces were moving that I enjoyed just watching.
Okay.
When I was a law student and I went and sat in courtrooms and watched everybody doing their role, I loved it.
Yes, everybody doing their role, and you realize that what everybody's doing in that room, it's not necessarily for profit, which is what happens in right. But it's everything that's going around on there is centered on the destinies of human life.
For sure.
And so, again, that's why. So, if you love, is it because you love it because you're interested in making sure that people are given a second chance or a fair chance to life, or is just how things work in the courtroom that you love?
Well, I think the thing that hooked me was the courtroom environment, that it was a place that I felt at home for some reason and loved. But there's no question that the underlying thing that's going on there and how people are treated, and really the idea of a courtroom is that things are equalized, that fairness comes at the end, although we see so many problems in this human system we have. But this idea that people come to this place where we all have agreed that things are going to be settled, and that if everybody is doing their best, that we have the best shot at a fair outcome more often than not, I guess is the best way to say it, is something that really inspires me.
Great. John, based off your background, you could have been a philanthropist, or because you obviously have, I mean, you obviously have that natural love for, people, community, and so why did you choose the judicial system, and why you love it so much?
I share Ms. Vahey's appreciation for the courtroom. I actually enjoy a courtroom. I enjoy the drama of it. I'd probably rather watch a trial than a football game. There is something addicting about it. And although I think in the United States most lawyers make rich people richer, that's really the role of most lawyers in the United States. I don't think too many people go to law school to themselves become rich. I think people do go to law school because they want to serve, and they do enjoy the concept of the law.
Thank you. A question from Mahey Ellen says, what injustices have you witnessed in or outside of the courtroom, and what was your response to those injustices? John, please.
Oh, well, I've seen innocent people get found guilty. I've seen people get sentenced to incredibly lengthy sentences that they don't deserve. I've seen people kicked out of their homes when they shouldn't have been kicked out of their homes. I've seen mistakes happen.
And what's your responses?
Well, if I'm still the lawyer on the case and you appeal, actually there are times when there's absolutely nothing you can do. You have to lend your shoulder to a client, and unfortunately you have to move on. I mean, it's a failed system, but it is a system.
Katherine, you want to respond to that?
There have been judges that I've seen consistently treat people poorly. And what I've been able to do since I've been assigned to courthouses is switch out of that courtroom, take my clients and go to a different courtroom, which you have a right to do. When you see certain types of cases appear in certain courtrooms, you have a certain number of days to move it, to ask for a substitution of judge. What you do as a lawyer when you're in courtrooms day in, day out is you understand how that courtroom works. And what you see is people treated differently from each other in a certain courtroom and differently from the same people in a different courtroom, where if you landed in front of a different judge, you would have a different advantage. You do your best knowing how the judge works in that courtroom to use all of that familiarity to the best of your clients.
Her next question is, what are your views on whether the court as a whole deals effectively with racial and gender bias?
No, I don't think it does.
Okay.
I think there is so much implicit bias that we all carry around with us. I think the court attempts to do it, but it doesn't. It doesn't.
I can't tell you how often I stand next to a client of mine in the courtroom, and my client is African American. I am white. The judge is white. The state's attorney is white. The clerk of the court is white. The court reporter is white. The police officer on the case is white. And I have watched that and wondered what that must be like. Because I think, and I certainly do everything I can so that my client understands I'm standing with him. But I think of that so often in a courtroom where that happens, and know that you can't walk into that room, whether you're in custody or out on bond, and feel that you're being judged by your peers in a courtroom where you don't see any of your peers. So I hope that awareness of that is the first step, but what John is saying is implicit bias is something that I think is also not examined by us sufficiently. And so we don't always, even though we have made and believe in progressive beliefs and choices, I don't think we all realize what our biases are unless we're constantly looking at them, addressing them, making sure when we have a thought that we push forward that. But that is something that's occurred to me so often in courtrooms.
You think the system will change? Are you optimistic about it? For the better?
I think it's struggling. Society in a whole has to change.
Yes.
Courts are only a reflection of society, because all a court and courts aren't there to solve all problems. I don't think courts should be involved in trying to solve addiction.
Okay.
I don't think courts should be involved in trying to solve mental health. We have mental health courts and we have drug courts. I'm not sure that those are such good ideas. I think that's probably a topic for another day. The only thing a court is really designed to do is to solve a dispute. And it should be limited to solving disputes that people bring to it. You can't ask a court to solve our racial problems. What you have to do is recognize we have racial problems and make sure the court addresses its own racial problems within the context of broader society. And the way you do that is you include more diverse races within the court system.
At every level. I'm sorry, I lost my point. Maybe I'll come back to
Yes.
Yeah.
As an aspiring judge, what three qualities would you expect, or do you think that any sitting judge should have? Three essential qualities.
I think that a judge should be humble and not think that they are more important than anybody who appears before them. I think a judge should be inclined to listen more than they're inclined to speak. And I think there should be, within judges, a real sense of the importance of each case, because although he or she may have dozens of cases that day, to each person who's showing up, that's their one case. And if that's not understood, then there's going to be a dismissiveness that's a problem. I think that's basic, what we need to see from judges.
John.
Courage is a big one. I think judges have to do the right thing, even when the right thing it may not be acceptable to the broader society. I think they have to have compassion, in which they are really sensitive to the person standing before them or the positions that people are taking. Even if it's a corporation, you have to have a certain understanding that this is a corporation, that this corporation represents a segment of our society, that this corporation is has jobs, has finances that you have to deal with. And I think a judge has to have passion for the role of a judge and passion for the court system.
I just remembered what I had forgotten, and that is this. I have seen the effect of cameras on people's phones on the court system. And that is that I think a number of years ago, before videos on the streets, that in my experience, that jurors were skeptical that police officers behaved badly. You had to really extend yourself to convince them. But that belief has been, if not broken, certainly addressed in a way where people are seeing things they never thought to see. I do think that that's having an impact on the way people perceive who there's. I don't think people assume the way they once did, that people in uniform are to be unquestioned. So
let me put forward this scenario. I don't know how religious you are, but I'm a religious person, and I know the story of King Solomon, when he had to judge between the woman the baby, the two mothers and the baby thing. Okay, so there were the facts, but in this case, King Solomon used his intuition to judge in favor of the real mother. Now, as a sitting judge, your job is to make decisions based on the facts, right? So if there are the facts, and the facts are leading one way, but then you look at the two people involved in this case, and you look in the mannerism, and your instincts, your natural intuition is telling you that A is innocent. Let's put it that way, right? Or A is in the good, but the facts are leading towards against A. Now, are you allowed, or should a judge use their natural intuition to judge in favor of A because their intuition says so, and when the facts are going actually against them?
Well, facts don't come out of nowhere. They come from people, and people have to be credible.
Right.
So what you might be speaking to is whether or not someone is credible or not.
Yes.
And so if someone is not credible, you have to understand, if you're hearing two different versions, your credibility has to be, you have to believe the person who's giving the facts.
Right.
You can't make up your own facts that you've decided you think happened.
Okay.
But in terms of when the facts come to you through the testimony of someone, you have to determine whether or not that's credible. And that involves how they're testifying, their manner, the way that they're speaking. So in some sense, we would certainly not use the word intuition.
You would not use it? Okay.
We would use the word credibility.
Credibility, okay. So judges don't necessarily use intuition, they use credibility.
They determine the credibility of the witnesses before them.
Okay.
And they use a bunch of factors to look at that.
But I'm saying, what if all the facts are going, let's say all the facts are going against A, right?
Right.
Which tells you that, okay, A is in the wrong. But then your intuition is that even though the facts are going against A did not do it based off the story that has been told.
Well, because you don't believe the story.
Right.
So that's a credibility issue.
Okay. John.
Yeah, you just say not guilty.
Yeah. right.
We have a caller on the line. Please tell us your name and where you go. Oh, hey, Shapiro, Jamie Shapiro is on the line. Jamie, how are you today? You're welcome. Jamie, this is the Progressive Mind Show. And we have, we earlier had a three panel here. The Honorable Judge Robin Shoffner just left. Currently, we have Katherine Maloney Vahey, who is running for the office of Cook County Judge. And also next to her here is John Christopher Benson, who's also running for the same office. Can you tell us a little about your background? We only have a few minutes to wrap up the conversation. Maybe in 7 minutes, tell us a bit about your background, what office you're running for, and why people should vote for you.
Sure. Thank you very much. So, I'm Judge for 5 years, 2007, 2012. I have right. Federal, state, in fact, in the entire sub-circuit, and I was just endorsed by the Chicago Tribune last week, so I believe I'm the best qualified candidate in the race, both in terms of judicial experience, legal experience, breadth of experience, and qualifications. And I'd love to answer some questions.
All right, brilliant. So why do you think in this race people ought to vote for you?
Well, because I now once after 5 or 6 years as a lawyer, and I've gotten high bar ratings from every single other bar association that's evaluated me. And because of those bar ratings, the Chicago Tribune uses those bar ratings to make its endorsement. And that's why I was endorsed over all 4 of my opponents. I also have some of the greatest diversity of legal experience, if not the greatest diversity of legal experience of anyone in my race. And that's why I think I'm the most qualified candidate.
Okay. What do you intend to achieve once you get there?
Well, I intend to achieve essentially the same thing that I achieved during my 5+ years on the bench, which is being a good judge, which means being a fair judge, being a judge smart enough to understand the lawyer's arguments, but not feeling the need to be the smartest one in the room. I really want the lawyers to be the smartest ones in the room, at least with respect to their own case, so they can educate me on their case. I just want to be smart enough to be able to understand them well enough to make a decision on their arguments. So I really, rely on the lawyers to help me do my job in deciding the case fairly. And I want to have, most importantly, and may take to appreciate this unless maybe some pro se litigants might appreciate it. It's really important to have a good judicial temperament and demeanor. It really makes the practice of law very difficult in front of a judge who has a bad temperament. The practice of law is difficult enough without the forum; it can get more difficult. So those three pillars, I think, fairness, temperament, and intellect, are the three most important qualities. There are other things, like obviously integrity, which I take for granted. My father was a judge. They used to call him Honest Dad for over 3 decades back where I grew up. Punctuality, it's important to be on time and to be considerate about everyone else's time, the lawyers and the litigants' time. They were able to get there on time. The judge should too. There are other factors, but I think three are his temperament and intellect.
Okay, in your absence, we talked about some of the causes some of the root causes of the increase in high numbers of juvenile offenders and what the court system can do to mitigate this problem. Would you want to, in a minute, because of the lack of time, touch on this?
Yeah. So at one of my judicial education conferences, we had a seminar on this issue, and it was by a scientist, not by a lawyer or a judge, and he taught us that juvenile offenders are different because the center of their brain, which is their kind of maturity center, is called the amygdala, are not developed as adolescents. And so we need to treat adolescents differently because their brain isn't fully developed, particularly their amygdalas. So adolescents, they're not children and they're not adults. They're in between. There's what we call sui generis in the law, a class unto themselves. And we need to focus on rehabilitation, which is one of the 4 goals of criminal punishment. We need to focus on rehabilitation with juveniles and not on punishment, on retribution. We need to focus on rehabilitation almost to the exclusion of the other goals of criminal punishment. So that's we need to focus on restorative justice. We have restorative justice courts now with Judge Sheehan. Restorative justice is the zeitgeist of the court system now, and that's what we need to focus on with juveniles.
Do you think the court system is doing enough to mitigate this problem? And if they are, can you mention one thing that has been initiated and which in your opinion will go a long way to help?
Well, yeah, as I mentioned, I think Judge Sheehan's restorative justice court out on the west side in Lawndale has gone a long way. We're trying. Chief Judge Evans is trying, and the judges are trying, and I know a lot of my former colleagues in juvenile court are trying hard to make the system work for juveniles. So all we can do is try. That's why we try cases and practice law. We never get there. We're never perfect, but we're making the effort. So I think Judge Sheehan's restorative justice court out in Lawndale, I think we need more of those. And I think we need to rehabilitate our juvenile offenders rather than punishing them.
Okay. We only have 4 minutes to wrap up, so we'll share it equally. You will take one, I take one, and then the two beautiful people here will also take one each. We'll start from, the ladies first, obviously. So we'll start from you. Just take 1 minute.
Sure.
Tell our audience and everybody else that's listening when they have to vote and why they should vote for you, and what they can do to help you get the votes that you're looking for.
So on the ballot, my name is Katherine Maloney Vahey. You can punch 122. If you live in Cook County, you can vote for me now in early voting up through the close of voting on Election Day. If you want to find out more information, you can check me out on Facebook at Vahey, V as in Victor, AHEY, FOR Judge. And I'd ask if you believe in me that you would spread the word to family and friends, because when you're running for judge, you don't have the level of attention that bigger candidates do. As Judge Shoffner said, I'm recommended and qualified by all the evaluating bar associations. I've spent 19 years, my whole legal career, serving as public defender every day in courtrooms. I'm asking you to look into more about me and to support me so that I can win this election. I appreciate so much the invitation to be here and the opportunity to speak. Thank you so much for that.
You're welcome. Mr. Benson, please.
Yeah. I think my background is consistent with taking care of or addressing the problems that the marginalized people face: poverty, mental illness, drug abuse. I dedicated my life to that always, starting with the Peace Corps, starting with going through with the Public Defender's Office, with Cabrini Green Legal Aid, and now as a civil rights attorney. I too am qualified, recommended by all the bar groups, and I've lived in the 8th Sub-Circuit for over 33 years. So on March 20th, I think people should vote for John Christopher Benson.
And you're also running for the judge of Cook County?
Yes.
Okay, Cook County judge seat, that's what you're running for?
Yes.
Okay. Jamie Shapiro, your turn.
Thank you so much, and thank you for inviting me on your show.
You're welcome.
So I'm not only qualified or recommended by all the bar associations, I'm the only one in my race who's rated highly qualified by the premier bar association, the Chicago Bar Association, based on my experience and my judicial experience and my legal experience. Because of that, the Chicago Tribune endorsed me over all 4 of my opponents because of the breadth and diversity of my experience, because I have a track record on the bench. In fact, the longest track record on the bench of any of the candidates who were or have been sitting judges. I have compassion for people. As an assistant U.S. attorney, I prosecuted a cross-burning case which made new law in Illinois, Indiana, and Wisconsin, which split from the law in the Federal Court of Appeals to the west of us. And I think I am the best candidate. These races are way far below the radar screen. Frankly, I'll tell your listeners, I frankly don't believe in electing judges. I think a lot of people agree with me. I believe in merit selection of judges, but until if and when we change the state constitution, we're left with the system that we have, which is basically merit election rather than merit selection. So I believe I'm the merit candidate in the race based on my highly qualified rating and my Chicago Tribune endorsement, and I hope anyone living along Chicago's lakefront between Chinatown and Edgewater will punch number 151 and vote for me. I'm the first one on the ballot, and I thank you for your consideration.
Thank you so much, Shapiro. Kelly Schultz Bartos says, I'm so glad that I watched this. I definitely learned a good deal about the legal system that I was not aware of. Great job, candidates. So that's somebody congratulating you and in appreciation of what you have done this evening. Terrific discussion. Great job, Aliko. That's from Johnny Woods. Okay, if I wasn't able to mention your name, it's because of time. So don't blame it on me, blame it on time. Next week, Tuesday, the Progressive Minds will come your way again with another wonderful topical discussion that would benefit our community. I always tell you that this is the #1 community building show. We try with every show to do this. And so we always encourage you to go on our website to make donations on donations that would better what we're doing. Thank you, Mrs. Katherine Maloney Vahey. I want to make sure that I get it right. That's why I'm taking my time mentioning it. And then Mr. John Christopher Benson, Jamie Shapiro, thank you. The Honorable Judge Robin Shoffner just left. Thank her so much for making this show a success. Until next week, keep building your community. Remember, to whom much is given, much is required. God bless. Bye-bye. Thank you so much. That's it.
Really? Wonderful show. Can you end that?
Yeah.
Since it's not even working.